These next two exercises are going to deal with touch hit detection and object collision detection. We already showed how to read the user's mouse coordinates when they click or mouse over our canvas in exercise number 14. Now we're going to cover hit detection for the mouse or finger touch against an array of objects. So if you're programming a game or an application where the user taps, clicks, or touches the canvas to make things happen, you'll want to understand hit detection for the mouse against the assets on your canvas so that you know exactly what is being touched. Now we're going to start with the same exact code that we left off with when we were discussing putting JSON objects and arrays to work in our applications. I think that was exercise 17. It's the same exact code that we left off with. What I'm going to do is go into the body and I'm going to add an element with an ID of status. That way I can just output some status, so as the developer of this application I can see what's going on. Now the first thing that we're going to add is a mouse down event, which also works for fingers on a tablet. So you can think of it as finger down as well. So what we'll do is just grab this window add event listener, and we'll pop it up here into place. Make sure we indent it correctly. Actually, we'll just remove that code. And we got to make sure that we target the canvas. So we'll say ctx.canvas.addEventListener of mouse down. Now I've tested on an Android tablet, and mouse down works for Android tablets and probably all other tablets. And there's also, just for your guys' referencing sake, there's these 5 events for JavaScript that are made specific for touchscreen tablets or touchscreen devices. So instead of only mouse down event listener, you can add a touch start listener. So the first thing within our mouse down event handling function is we're going to get the mouse X and the mouse Y coordinates for where the user's mouse X and mouse Y is on our canvas. We talked about the code that gives us those values in exercise number 14, so we're not going to really discuss this in depth since we already did. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run a for loop over the buildings array again. So we can actually grab this loop's structure and put it right here. Make sure we put in our closing curly brace, and actually we can get this too right there. Now I'm simply going to place a condition, and then I'll explain the logic behind all of the expressions that we're using in the condition. But basically what this code gives you is hit detection for your touch or your mouse against objects on your canvas. And what I'm doing is putting in the status element, you touched whatever object's ID. So it could either be the house, the grocery, or the post office. So let's run this in our favorite browser, and let's touch one of these objects. First I'm going to touch all around them, and you can see that nothing's happening. I get no status output, which is good. Now if I go and touch on one of them, it says you touched house. If I touch another one, or I can touch all around them again, nothing happens. If I touch another one, it says you touched post office, you touched grocery. So it's sensing exactly where we're touching, and our application knows that the user is touching a specific item. So if I want to make this go to a URL, I can make these buttons. I can simply come here and in my buildings array add URL property to all of these items, and then when that specific item is clicked, send the user to a URL. And that would be simple. Just say b.url in your window.location code. You say window.location is equal to b.url. Okay, now let me explain the logic behind how we get this hit detection condition. And I'll just read it out into plain English, and hopefully you can understand the logic of what's going on. So we're saying if the mouse's X position is greater than or equal to the building's X position, and the mouse X position is less than the building's X position plus the building's width. So you have to add the building's X position plus the building width to really get the horizontal dimensions for how big the building is and where it is in space on the canvas. And we also have to add 2 more expressions to evaluate to see if in the vertical space on the canvas, if the click is in the same coordinates as the building, or the mouse down or the finger touch is in the same coordinates as the building. So we say if the mouse's Y position is greater than or equal to the building's Y position, and the mouse's Y position is less than the building's Y positions plus the building's height. Basically, all of this logic lets you put up a bounds, an imaginary bounds of a rectangle, to where if the user clicks anywhere in that rectangle, we're going to handle it with code inside of the condition. And in the next exercise, exercise number 19, we're going to talk about object collision, because you might have animated objects all over the scene and you want to know if any of them are hitting one another. So maybe nobody's clicking in your application, and clicks aren't the thing that you're listening for. Maybe you just want to know if one floating object smacks into another. For instance, if you're programming like a laser game where the user is shooting a laser, and you want to know if any of your lasers are hitting any of the enemies, things like that. So we'll do collision detection in the next exercise. And this one was all about mouse collision detection, or mouse hit detection.